people walk in circles if they don't have a map, and they don't think they are, and you can't convince them that they are walking in circles. But the studies show over and over again that when people are sent out to go for a hike and kind of in a forest, that without some very specific markers, they tended to go in a circle, and it was study after study.
Welcome, everybody. This podcast is all about you. Why knowledge matters. Welcome, everybody. I'm Yannick, your host, and now joining me, Johannsen Brock. Dr. Johannsen Brock is the author of Coaching for Multilingual Student Success, and now I'm so excited to actually talk to you in person online about your wonderful book. Welcome, Dr. Johannsen Brock, to the show. Such a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's always fun to talk about education and things that matter most to me. So I'm happy to be here.
Who is Johannsen Brock in one sentence?
In one sentence, I am a daughter, a mother, and a learner, and have had decades of work within education. So that has been another part of my definition of who I am, is I kind of see the world through education.
And it's also very particular because you were mentioning in your book you actually grew up in Canada and then moved with your parents to the US. And this ultimately somehow facilitated you of writing this book because you recognize that there are a lot of second English language students that have somehow challenges, especially when it comes to schooling. So, but let's first go a little bit into your early experiences and your aspirations. And what do you think shaped your career choices in education?
Yeah, I in high school I was actually not even planning on going to college. I had a class my senior year that was just, I went down to the elementary school and I tutored kindergarteners, and I enjoyed it. I love children, and so it was great fun. But I found I worked with kids who were struggling with reading, and I sat one-on-one and watched a child just get it when I was sitting across them, and they understood it, and I moved them fairly quickly with my unskilled high school and approach to education. But the look in a child's eyes when they get it, I was hooked. I I I signed up for college, and I went to the university and I said, "Is there anything where you can just work in small groups or one-on-one with kids, or what is that?" And they said, "Actually, that's special ed. You can go into special ed and do that." And so I started in special ed, and at the time they required a dual major, so I did special ed and elementary education, and I have been hooked on the experience of watching a child's eyes when they go through the struggle and then they finally land and they get it. And that has hooked me for decades now. I love that, the opportunity to be engaged in a child's learning experience throughout that. And then as I have progressed in my career, I have really enjoyed supporting teachers and helping teachers have what they need to be effective and have teaching be fun and really fulfilling for them. It's really filled a spot in my life to be in education and helping in a variety of ways and a variety of levels throughout my career.
That really sounds beautiful how you came into education. It's like a perfect scenario actually to, think about, how to find your way somehow because it's so difficult to actually find your path. For a lot of people, it's really hard to actually find a career, for
Yeah.
themselves that really, hooks them and that it truly hooked you. Really good for you. Where
what's the
do
phrase? It had me at hello, right? I just
exactly.
it's the right place for me, and I've really found many niches throughout different phases of my life. I can always find a niche in education where I can deeply contribute, and so that's been very fulfilling for me.
Did you had any mentors, or were especially your parents influential in your path, or were you basically like, it sounds like you were raised without knowing, but really in a family that knew what self-determination theory is, and you kind of, bumped into your destiny.
Yeah. I while I didn't have necessarily a pressure to go to college and to do something career wise, my parents are they were really just they expected us to do our best and in everything we did, wherever we went, we were going to be doing our best. And so um, I think just being raised as hard workers and being raised with the idea that you have a contribution and we need you to show up. And showing up is a big part of anything you do, and give it your best try. You don't have to be the best at anything, but give it your best. Give it what the situation deserves. And if that was doing the dishes or cleaning my room or my work in school, while I wasn't uh, mapping out my career early in my life, there was always a standard of you have the ability, so we need to see you doing good work. So there was never uh, an ability to slack on any part of just my education from the beginning. Um, and then when I think of different people who influenced me career wise, I think of a mentor very early on, my very first teaching experience. There was a woman who became a dear friend, Gwen Andrus, who got a level of learning and engagement out of students that I just hadn't even imagined was something you could do. She would have students. She took the lid off of learning, and I watched her classroom in my first 2 years. I was down there watching her classroom. I asked her to come and watch in my classroom and give me ideas and coach me. I didn't really even know what that was. I just saw what she had, and I thought, I think I could figure that out. I think I could do something like that in my classroom. I wanted students to really believe in themselves in the way that she was able to do that with students. And so she became a very important mentor and is still a dear friend and mentor throughout my life. We did some really fun as I grew up a little bit in education, and we were able to do some really fun things where we said, let's try it. Let's do it. We wrote some grants and created a science lab that our we team taught for a little while, and our sixth graders ran the science lab, and we opened it up as a field trip to students from other schools and from our school. And our sixth graders ran a science lab with pretty deep uh, modules or activities that kids would come and do as kind of a field trip. And so just those kinds of those opportunities for somebody to sit next to me and say, let's try it, let's do something cool. And uh and a little bit of grant writing and not much money and a lot of garage sales and used
Oh, yeah.
used items, and we made a really fun science lab. And so it's those kinds of people that will sit next to me and say, let's dream, let's do this. It's given me the energy to keep looking at where could we improve this little corner that we're in right now. I thoroughly believe in public education and the fact that it opens the doors to everybody, and we take whoever walks in our door, and we make sure that we invest and give them the next step in life. And so that really resonates with me to my soul. It really resonates with me. So
I can really tell, I can really feel that when you're talking about this whole journey of you, and that you're really where you are meant to be. And that's very powerful if you have those kind of colleagues, who make such an impact, especially in schools, because we
yeah.
know schools are also very political places, much more than it actually ought to be, in my view. And
Yeah.
so that's wonderful, and I think we really need those beacon of light, as you are. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into the book.
Oh,
But
great.
let's first just start with defining what actually coaching means. What's very interesting in general is now it becomes more and more prevalent, especially also life coaching, because this is also something that we have a coach for everything, for hockey, for soccer, football, or whatever
Sure,
you want.
sure.
But actually, for the most difficult part is actually living life between the peaks, right? And
Right.
so that is really hard, not easy. That is actually the hardest thing. And you wrote a book about how coaching can be implemented, district wise, and then also at the school level,
Yeah.
and how important it actually is for professional development. And really you underline it with a lot of stats to what it actually means and how powerful it is. So let's start with what coaching is, and then we go about how you go about it and so on.
But and I've really gained so much from the coaching experiences that I've had, and by watching that with a little investment in a teacher. Let's mostly what we're talking about within the book is when a teacher is standing at one spot and wants to move forward, it's so much faster if you sit next to a colleague and say, here's where I am, or this is a problem of practice I have right now. I've got these three students in my classroom who are multilingual and they're not progressing, so help me, watch me, let's talk through what this looks like. And a lot of times people think of like coach as a as a coaching expert, where they'll come in and say, fix that and change this and move that. And it really is a shoulder partner where you're talking to each other and talking specifically about your class, your situation every year, which is one of the things I love about education is you never finish learning. Every year you have a different group of students that your tricks that you had last year that were very successful with the last group of students still need to be polished up and adjusted a little bit to make the difference for the students who are sitting in front of you. And so I really I enjoy the thought process that goes into what do these students in front of me today need? What is it going to take to move them from where they are to where they need to be? And in some cases we've got to make up more ground. And so how do we do those kinds of things with rapidity? And coaching will bring new ideas in, will help bounce ideas off, will just give us the opportunity. Everybody's so busy in a school, and to have a coach that will sit down with you and think about your situation and not have to move to their own situation. It's a really generous conversation to be able to say, let's look carefully at the students that you have right now, and let's look carefully just even at what you're dealing with in your own personal life. Maybe what you were able to give last year you just simply can't give this year. And so how can we bridge that gap, and how can you have a colleague who is invested in you and what you're doing with the students. And so the message is not a coach is here to fix you. The message is the coach is walking right beside you.
What is some of the what are some of the biggest barriers that you face with students, uh, especially with teachers? I'm sorry, with teachers. That they don't feel like they are observed, in a negative sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of the ways that coaching has been rolled out has been a teacher who's struggling. Maybe a coach will be sent in, or a teacher who's brand new, a coach will be sent in. So the teachers who are neither struggling nor new have found little reason to use a coach. And oftentimes the coaching structures in a district don't even allow, or a school don't even allow time for the coach to work with good teachers. Good, that's not fair, but with teachers who are traveling along and learning and growing, and don't even have the exposure to see how quickly conversation can actually move you sorry, can move you to where you want, where you want to be next and help you think outside of your box that you live in a little bit. And so that's probably one of the bigger barriers is helping districts, schools, and coaches able to see strength coaching is probably the most effective um, quick result that we get when a teacher who's getting great results sits down with a coach and talks about their next step or something they'd like to try or a creative project or something they're stuck with. uh, that coaching process is a really effective and very quick process, and that's kind of the hidden secret in coaching is our effective teachers get most out of coaching, and we don't often put our time and resources to our high achieving, high gains teachers.
And it's also very important because usually the teacher, the very successful and experienced teacher, let's say, doesn't necessarily mean that this teacher is experienced, but generally speaking, the successful teachers, they always want to keep growing, right? I mean, this is the whole purpose. And I think, having a beautiful life is really about progressing, the small wins every single day and really cherish them and noticing them and having a coach at least while reading your book. It really helps to not just bouncing ideas, but also to actually find and refine your practice and to go really to the next level.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes the coach will come in and model a lesson or a strategy or a technique. Sometimes they'll watch as the teacher is doing that with their class and then give some feedback. Sometimes it's planning together. It really is meeting the teacher where they are and with what depending on the strategy that they're looking at. uh, or the approach that they're trying to do. We had a really fun project that I talked about in the book fairly recently where we had 250 um, elementary, so K-3 teachers that were implementing a fairly structured program for phonics and phonemic awareness. And coaches went into every single classroom, experienced teachers, brand new teachers. And the first week, they just modeled the lesson. It was about a 30-40-minute lesson, and they just modeled as designed. And then the next couple of weeks, they came in as the teacher requested with either co-teaching or modeling again or observing the teacher and giving feedback. And within 2 months, we had implemented in 250 classrooms a process that and at really at 90-95% fidelity, and teachers were saying, oh my goodness, I had never worked with a coach before. When does a coach come again? How about that? And so now when we try to implement something new, the question rises from all levels of teachers. So when does the coach come? How much access will I get for the coach to come in and work with this program or process with me? And it works the same thing. We've used some instructional strategies. Another one I outline in the book is Margarita Calderon's 7 steps to vocabulary routine and for multilingual learners that really benefits every single child in your classroom. And that routine is a 2-minute routine per word, but it has some 7 steps. And so working with teachers, most teachers within a couple of days know the routine and have it working fairly well in their classroom when they have a coach. And these are the kinds of things that I bring in together with why multilingual. We have as a country, as a world, we are not getting our multilingual learners speaking quickly enough and really engaged in academic language. And coaching can make it so that every teacher within months can put some strategies in their classroom that they're using every day and really every hour of every day. And so it's we've known these strategies for years and years, and there are new ones coming out all the time, but we've got some really great strategies that are simply not being implemented. And part of it is it's a lot of time and effort to try to do it on your own. But having a coach come in uh, takes this very urgent matter and puts it in a place where we really can get the majority of our teachers using these strategies for most of the day, and it makes a huge difference. It's a lot more fun to be effective, and that's what coaching really will do for you, is take you from wherever you're standing to your next step.
And it's
And it's
also, to
also,
me,
to
to
me,
some
to
extent,
some
even
extent,
though
even
that's
though
not
that's not
necessarily the
necessarily the
coach's
coach's
role,
role,
but it's
but
also
it's
about
also about
accountability. And we
accountability. And
all
we
need, to
all need,
some
to some
extent, an
extent, an
accountability
accountability
partner.
partner.
And
Right.
And
you
you
cite some
cite some
stats that's
stats that's
usually it's
usually
about
it's about
20% of
20% of
implementation if
implementation if
teachers take,
teachers
let's
take,
say,
let's say,
professional
professional
development
development
courses, right?
courses, right?
Mhm.
And
And
but if
but if
people
people
actually follow
actually
up
follow
with
up
a
with a
coach, or if
coach,
it's
or if it's
implemented with a
implemented with a
coach,
coach,
the
the
implementation rate
implementation
is
rate is 90%
90% up.
up.
So
So
that's
Yes.
huge.
that's
Yeah.
Why
huge.
do
Why
you
do you
think
think
this
this
is?
is?
Well, I think about it in many examples in my own life, but just even when I'm trying to do something on my own, I think back to a time when I was trying to learn to water ski on one ski, and the patient people in the boat, I started getting self-conscious because it was round after round after round of me getting almost up and then I dropped, and almost up and then I dropped, and I just couldn't figure. I was doing everything technically correct. And it was probably 6 or 7 times of me just, get almost up and then the water was just splashing in my face and I couldn't breathe and I had to drop. And I did this several times and I just said, "You know what? Pick me up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm wasting everybody's ski time. Let me just get back in the boat." And somebody yelled from the boat, "Tuck your chin." By tucking my chin, because I was letting the water come right at my face and then I just couldn't breathe anymore and I couldn't last long enough with no breath to get up. But someone from the boat yelled, "Tuck your chin." And I tucked my chin, and there's air down there. So the water was hitting the top of my head and not my nose. And I popped right up. I just needed somebody saying one little thing that I was missing in the steps. And I couldn't for the life of me. That seems like such a ridiculous thing that I didn't notice that if I tucked my chin, I could actually breathe. But I needed somebody yelling from the boat, "Tuck your chin." And it's those kinds of things with just a little tweak is usually all we need, but it's, so often I would try something new when if I didn't use a coach, I'd try something new and it blew up in my classroom. It didn't work very well, and so I would think, "Well, I'm never doing that again." That just doesn't. So I give up easier when I don't have a coach, and I miss a few subtleties when I don't have a coach, and so those are, some reasons personally where I think it makes a big difference, and I've seen that happen over and over with hundreds of people at this point. I've been doing coaching conversations and coaching training for the last probably 20 years in different settings, and it's magic. It's just kind of the last little bit. It's the icing on the cake. It's the last little bit that changes it so that this thing that we had a goal to do and wanted to do becomes reality and fairly quickly.
Talk a little bit about heavy and light coaching and why it is so important. And you just mentioned also in the book, and we come back a little bit later about what you to some extent mentioned is really usually we tend to actually walk in circles, right? If we do not have, uh, a star, the North Star, let's say. So dive a little bit deeper into that because this I really found fascinating. And also it really resonates because we always do a little bit. I see it in myself. We always do a little bit what we are comfortable are with, right? Even though we might not be very successful. But it's like almost like insanity. I think the definition of insanity is doing it over and over again and expecting different results. So please
Right.
elaborate on this.
Well, yeah, the example that I gave in the book when I read really resonated with me about people walk in circles if they don't have a map and they don't think they are, and you can't convince them that they are walking in circles. But the studies show over and over again that when people are sent out to go for a hike and kind of in a forest, that without some very specific markers, they tended to go in a circle, and study after study, which I really resonate with because I am terrible at directions anyway. So I mean that spoke to my soul. Um, but with the coaching heavy, coaching light, this is something Dr. Joel and Killian, who is one of my education heroes, to be sure. Um, she wrote this like in 2010, and I'm so grateful to her because it's a quick article and it's free. You by searching that, it comes right up. I think it comes up through ASCD or Learning Forward, but um, she talks through what just gets right to the core of coaching. A lot of times, uh, coaching can the interpretation is, well, first you have to set up, you have to spend a lot of time building trust and doing some different things and gathering materials for people and doing all the different things to build a relationship. And of course, she would agree you have to have a relationship to coach. And the coaching heavy, coaching light compares relationship building as your priority to which is coaching light, where what she determines as coaching heavy is really accomplishing goals that impact student achievement, and that being the center of the conversation of coaching. And by doing that, it changes the work and the question, it changes the work of the coach, it changes the questions the coach is asking, it keeps the conversation on, so how will this impact children, and how will this make a difference in your classroom? And by making that adjustment at the very beginning, I have just seen the light go on for so many coaches, because it's hard to move into a coaching position when you've been a teacher. When you're a teacher, you run your classroom and you work off your strengths. And coming into the coaching role, there's a bit of a, well, I'm just like a student teacher supervisor to everybody, or how does this play? I guess I'll just tell you my glory days and how it worked for me, kind of thing. And that's not effective coaching. And so by focusing from the very beginning with, what is your problem of practice in terms of your student growth? How is student growth? What can we do to move student growth? What part of the day, what part of your class, to being able to ask some questions that get right to the center of, what strategies will you implement in your classroom to change student growth? It's not a student, well, I don't have the right students. It's, these students need different instructional strategies. And so coaching heavy gets right to that conversation. And that little article has been a light bulb article for hundreds of coaches that I've worked with. I say little because it's about 2 pages, and it's an easy read with a great chart that maps it out. And it has been such an aha moment for me to really articulate what I've been trying to say. She's just said it so nicely. And also, many coaches, as they're trying to transition into the role of coach, to be able to read that article in their early days has been just very foundational.
And for you, there's a no-brainer that, for example, you just have this innate ability, obviously through hard work, you acquire that. You have this maturity, this expertise that people, especially teachers, at least from my point of view, what I can tell here, that's the first time actually I met you online, is like immediate trust. So I would let you immediately come into my classroom, no issue at all. But there's also one thing that you also have to grow into this maturity as a coach. And I
Yeah.
think there it's sometimes there are certain barriers that some teacher might not 100% trust a certain coach. Did you ever face those challenges? Because I think these are real, and we know that there's a lot of, even though gossip is a no-go, in my view, it should never
Right,
happen
right,
in,
right.
in school settings among colleagues. But we are far away from that, unfortunately. I think we can be very clear, although it's a wonderful profession. So how do you address that, to actually have a coach that, let's say, works under you, who is really has this trustworthiness? Because it takes time, it takes a lot of personal development, expertise to become such a coach.
Yeah, and I think that that is the hardest part of this whole job is the comfort level from the coach's side to be able to feel like, I'll come in and we'll have a conversation, and I know you don't trust me today, but I'm gonna build trust through our conversation around the thing that's important to you." Um, I think a couple of things that we do structurally within the coaching, design that makes some of that a little bit easier. One is coaching needs to be tied to some sort of learning. To have my opinion versus your opinion, and why don't you try this? And why don't you try that? It has to come from somewhere. And the most effective place that I've seen that come from is the school improvement plan. So if the whole school is working on math implementation this year, or the whole school is working on really expanding their ability to support multilingual students, then we're learning together. The coach is there in the learning session. The coach is there when we are in the learning session, practicing together, writing lesson plans together, doing those different things. And when the principal of the school at the end or throughout the learning session says, in the next 6 weeks, we're all going to be implementing this. The coach is available. Here's a menu of things that the coach can do for you. And this is when the coach is coming to you. So setting that up and putting the coach in a place of, we all have the same goal, and I'm here to help you move through that goal. Um, it's uh, the coaches come in by invitation, but the principal kind of set up that invitation. And so when we have a, let the coach come in and coach on whatever you feel like you want to work on, we don't get very good results. We don't get the same, this, we don't move the school, and we have things come up in life, and like, well, yeah, we started that but we didn't finish it. That happens really often. But when we tie it to the school improvement plan, where we're all learning together, and then the second step that we often miss in education is we're all implementing. We only did this learning together because we looked at our student data, and this is what our students need now. We've got a hole in what we're giving as compared to what our students need, or this group is particularly needy of, in these areas. And so once we've looked at the data and able to say, this is what our school is working on, and this is why, and we all know why, and we know that this grade or this department is going to have a different take on it, and yet we're all going to have a common goal to make some progress there. When you're in the high school setting, the art teacher is going to have a very different way to that goal than the English language arts teacher, and that's okay. It's what does that goal look like in the different classrooms, and we don't want to make it the same. That's not realistic, and it's contrived when we do that. And when we are, as a school, looking at our school improvement plan and we recognize what we need to work on, we have to. We have to implement it. We have to show that we can move students from here to here, and we're going to change our instructional strategies and instructional approach to meet the kids where they are. So that coaching works better and has real results on student growth when we are tying it to our data and we're all learning together, and we have some implementation goals and expectations.
You are basically the coach of the coaches, okay, in your district, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. And so, how does the coach of the coaches get coaching?
So the coaches give me great feedback. I really rely on the coaches to, we come up with a problem of practice, and I give, so this is where I'm going. These are our constraints, is what kind of the Apollo 13, let's put everything on the table, and we gotta fix this, and we gotta put a, a round peg into a square hole. um, but it's the coaches. Definitely. And then I have mentors across my career where I'm really looking at problems of practice with them, and asking. And I get told no, and I have constraints as well, but, I see, the coaches as my colleagues. Certainly, I have to move, that train forward, with the constraints that we're under, but in terms of how do we make this work, and how will it work in your setting, and what what, learning do we as a group need to do, and where am I stopping your growth? What am I doing? What barriers am I putting in your path, and how can I move them? The other place, the principals that I work with, I really want to make sure that I'm hearing them, that the coach that's in their school is is removing barriers for their teachers, and how I can, what I can do to further help that coach be even more effective in their school. So I have different thought partners that I work with, and then I just do a lot of reading. I really enjoy organizational structure, teamwork, implementation, research, and podcasts. And I do a lot of running after um, good ideas, and something that'll challenge my thinking. That's fun for me. So, that's my nerdy fun thing.
What's the first thought when you get up in the morning?
I go for a long walk. I live on the top of a hill, so I start going downhill, and then I come up, and I'm breathless on the way up. It's like a 15% grade. I mean, it's a tough hill. Um, and I that's my time to be creative and be thoughtful. I do a lot of spiritual work, in that on those walks, and then followed up with a little something that sets my course. I spirituality and my religious practice are really close to my heart, and a guiding force in my life. And so I try to reset every morning and reset a couple times throughout the day. Um, so that's an important piece for me. That's where my day starts. Is I need to be out there being active. I know that if I don't exercise in the morning, um, it may not happen in the day, and I miss it in the day when I haven't. So that's a big piece for me.
When did you decide that you have to write this specific book, which I truly find inspiring for teachers as well as coaches? I think it just gives you a very holistic view of the teaching profession and how important it is to find in one way or another, whether your district or your school has the money for actually hiring coaches or not, but at least find somehow a mentor or a support system, at least, because obviously it always also comes down to finances, right? And that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
always easy.
Yeah. And for sure, to your point, um, the research on a coach removed from the classroom and really dedicated to this is the strongest. But we all can find a peer, and we can all go through a coaching cycle with a peer, and that it's valuable. We all need a friend who is willing to listen to us brainstorm and think. Um, I think in terms of when did it first come to me, I wrote a training course on coaching probably 25 years ago, and used that in different settings as part of. I've done a lot of school turnaround work. I've calculated, I've probably visited somewhere in the 4,000, 4,500 classrooms at this point in my career. It's been something that has just brought immense joy. I learn something in every classroom where I'm sitting in the back of the classroom, just watching teaching happening and learning happening. So it's been a love and passion of mine to be able to be in classrooms and to see the learning process. Uh, and then over the last several years, I had three teenagers at my home. So I had an ache to be writing, but I didn't have time to be writing. And really, the work and my interest in writing and my interest in the science of implementation really came while I was doing my doctoral work. Um, and I didn't go into I didn't go into the research field when I got done with my doctoral work. I jumped into consulting and did school turnaround work and found that to be something that not only was I good at it, I felt like I could really help in that setting, but it really ignited a passion for me that this is hard, hard work to make sure that the school is organized for student success. And uh, principals really needed somebody to sit and talk to, and superintendents needed somebody to sit and talk to that wasn't evaluating them. And so that became a role that I absolutely fell in love with and learned from observing and working in more than 100 different schools and districts and in a couple of different states. And it just really helped me to see there are 101 ways to get to get the job done where we can organize a school around the strengths of the people that are there at the school. And I really believe that if we can gather smart people around a table that care about their school, which is the teachers, if we can get everybody's voice in problem solving, decisions and structures can be built that are far superior to anything that somebody coming from the outside in could ever suggest. And so I've just found that by building on the strengths of what's in the building, good things happen.
You also did you really it was like the the really the cherry of the cake, I guess, when you studied at Oxford University, which is very special, obviously. I have friends that they tell me it's a really special place, and it really
Yes.
feels like in a movie.
It is. It is. I I couldn't be luckier to have been able to go there. I was teaching second grade when I applied. I just finished a master's, and I was teaching second grade, and I had a friend who was there, and I went and visited him, and he had been encouraging me to get a PhD, and I thought I don't really need a PhD to do what I want to do. I just want to help. I just want to be in the doing it. And he just kept encouraging, and I went to Oxford and was just stunned, and I felt a real pull to first that I didn't think big enough for my life that I could make a path to get myself there. And I just felt very sad that I didn't think of myself as didn't think big enough for me. But I walked around that city, and at night it becomes magical. You just think, well, C.S. Lewis could walk around the corner. I mean, it just, anybody that's time stops. It's a really intoxicating place. And I felt such a pull. And my friend, who is wise and kind, said, apply. Right now, you're not a student here. Apply. If you don't get in, you're still not a student here. You're not any worse off. And so I applied um, in January. I got notification in about April that I was going to be that they accepted me. I didn't have money or a plan or anything to get there, and I scrambled, and by October, I was a student sitting in a seat at Oxford, and it was the most intimidating, scary thing. I didn't have a passport before I'd gone and visited him. I'd never been to England, and um, that it didn't even take me a full year from that visit to sitting in a seat there, and it was just intoxicating and um, very tough and very intimidating every step of the way, and uh, one of the best things I've ever done for myself. It was just an absolute gift, and it's something that when I lose confidence and when I'm in a room of people who disagree with me on something or whatever, I just can sit and think, you know what? I did that. I did that hard thing, and that's like I earned every step of the way, and so it's something I can always be proud of. I've got a certificate saying I did do it. So it was a really special, miraculous experience for me to make that happen.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to know a little bit about yesterday and today. Do you think schools or classrooms, particularly, are more difficult places than they were yesterday, let's say 10, 20 years ago? And if so, how?
Um, I would say yes, they're more difficult. There are a couple things, a couple layers to that answer. One is after COVID, it's been hard it's been hard to get back into a swing. We're still seeing effects of children, particularly in elementary school, we're seeing effects of children um, that were home and not having social experiences and coming to school still further behind academically than they had been, or not able to sit still or get along with somebody they don't know. Being in a place all day long with your age peers, nothing prepares you for that. When you're home, you're with your siblings and you have family rules, but you don't have experiences where you're with 25, 30, 35 of your age peers. And so you have to learn how to be a 10-year-old with a bunch of 10-year-olds, and you have to learn how to be an 8-year-old with a bunch of 8-year-olds, and you have to learn how to be a 15-year-old with a bunch of 15-year-olds. And so for the elementary schools, we still have got residual just socialization, I guess, is probably the most encompassing word for that, but just how to be in a group and how to learn with others and know how to get your needs and your experiences met in a group. And that's been tricky. And then on the other end with high school kids, being able to have they had time off, and they have some holes, and so we weren't ready to fill holes for everybody, and so that's been a challenge. And it's been impressive how people have risen to the challenge and met that challenge and changed things, and we've been able to expand and do all sorts of things like be online. And it's a Zoom nation now that we didn't have before, where we really can talk to each other in real time in different settings. So a lot of good came out of it, and we are scrappy, and so we had a lot of innovation has come from that we won't go back from. um, the other piece that I think that in the last 20 years, we've gotten a lot better at looking at data. And so it's been harder in some senses that are we used to be able to kind of go with the go with the averages. And even as far back as No Child Left Behind, when they said, you have to look at every population, you have to look at every subpopulation in your school and see if there's any group that you're feeling. You may be a high achieving school, you may be graduating 95% of your students, but if you've got 3,000 students in high school, that 5% is a big deal. That didn't and then there's the part that the data didn't used to track. Was we used to track high school graduation by how many students were enrolled at the beginning of high school, the first day of the October 1 of their senior year. Well, that leaves out a lot of kids who left us far before the October of their senior year. If you're still with us October of your senior year, we're a good chance you're going to graduate. We've kept you. But if somebody moved schools, exited out, we didn't always track those students and find out, did they drop out of school or did they really move to Mississippi? What happened to those students? And our data is showing more. We're able to track people more and see, did they ever transfer somewhere? We're able to see, there's a group of students, there's an ethnicity in our school that is not served. There's a group of kids who haven't grown this year. and we couldn't see that before. And so it's harder in that um, we now know for real who we aren't serving. It's easier because we have way more tools to serve, and we have way more ways to identify. And the identification, the assessments that we have are good. Now, state assessments don't give us granular enough information to see what exactly we're missing. But what a state assessment tells us is there a hole in your curriculum somewhere? Did you notice that all of your fifth graders didn't pass this part of fractions? Well, then now we can look at that kind of thing. It doesn't give us granular enough data to say this child needs this work, but our state assessments really have provided information we never had before. We could never look at our programs closely enough and see, oh, we've got holes in this one. There's no one passed this science component, or whatever it is we're looking at. We can look at it at pretty good levels, and we're able to predict. Now, if that child doesn't have this math concept in fifth grade, they don't pass ninth grade math. So we can look at that and play with our data in that way. So in some ways, the conversation got easier and a lot more complex.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. I want to just a little bit digress, and just I want you to give your take on social media and how you handle it from a personal perspective, and then how schools, handle it, and the complexity that comes into with social media, and just learning in general for especially our younger kids,
Yeah.
especially, middle school, high school, and the detrimental, impact it might have. I think largely we have the data. I think it's just a new book, the Anxious Generation by Jonathan Hyde, is, I
Mm.
think it's very revealing, and it's not really a surprise, but it also shows how troubling this is. And we all, even myself, I have to be very, very disciplined
Right.
to really stay away from social media, and if I do not have this discipline and these it's really about you how to organize yourself, your room where you live in, right? Then it's so hard. No one can really almost resist to it because
Right. Right.
it's addictive, right?
Yeah. No, it was a much easier time. I wouldn't say that I can say this is exactly how I think it should go. It's so complex. I've spent a lot of time in different levels of meetings. I've spent a lot of time in my own research and in my own. I've been on social media looking about information about social media and looking at the research, and um, it's tough. I mean, I was thinking recently when I had little children at home, we decided to move the TV out of our main living areas. So we had to go to the spot if we're going to watch TV, and kids had to ask permission, and it was limited, and it was all this. I had control over that, and I'm so grateful that we did that many years ago. That was I haven't been bombarded by the 24-hour news cycle for 20 years. My husband went to Iraq, um, when my children were little, and I got off of the 24-hour news cycle. I just couldn't watch the commentary while my husband was in harm's way, and I got completely out of that habit and have not gone back. I don't have a desire to, um, be cajoled by that, particular form of media. Um, and it was a struggle every step of the way to have teenagers with access to social media. And then when on top of COVID, when I had my own children in my own home, I didn't excel at making sure I tried all sorts of different ways to limit and and keep that. And I had 2 girls, there's the data's even stronger on your girls and how difficult it is in social media, and I am a believer. I think that social media was really hard on both of my girls in their teenage years, um, and the more we know, we keep finding out that it's hard for everyone, and The schools do all sorts of things to keep it to a minimum and to keep firewalls up, etc. And I think the schools are doing a valiant job. And sometimes parents are supporting that, and sometimes parents are thwarting and working around it. And that's
Mhm.
part of being a public system is um, everybody has their approach, and we are trying to honor everybody and protect everybody, and it's complex. It's a really difficult process. I applaud some of the legislation that I've heard discussed recently, where um, we can be harder on the different platforms that are letting kids on and justifying that. And there's no justification for a 13, 14-year-old to be on some sites, and certainly not younger than that either. And so I applaud that the adults in the room are still having those conversations and really grappling and trying to figure out what this is supposed to look like for kids. And I'm very hopeful that we'll just keep grappling, and that we'll get way better at it every time we're in a room discussing it, because it's complex, and there's privacy and safety and um, time wasting, and there's just so much to it, and so many good things. We have all sorts of tutorials and opportunities for students that I could never have dreamed of. So oh, what a balancing act. So I did not answer your question because I don't have an answer. So
No, you absolutely did, because it's really about protection. That's what I hear from you, protecting our children, our most vulnerable members of our society. Last but not least, Karen, what makes you feel alive?
um sometimes it's hiking up a mountain, and sometimes it's being in a great conversation. And usually I would say it's being in a great conversation, reading a great book, and then being able to turn to somebody in a book club, or just picking up the phone, or talking to my spouse, or just I love a good conversation. I don't even have to be right. I just want to think. I just want somebody to say, "What do you think of this? How about that? What does that look like? What is it? What could we do with that? What could we dream?" I love the um just a good conversation where I've seen somebody else's perspective, and I've heard somebody else's dreams. I have 8 sisters. I'm blessed to have 8 sisters, and um I have gained so much from being able to stand right next to them in their lives and feel the pain sometimes with what's going on with their children, or with their marriages, or with their um, successes, their disappointments. And I love to walk side by side people living their authentic lives, and that's what keeps me going.
Dr. Karen Johannsen Brock, thank you so much for being on the show. It has been such a blessing, and you're truly a blessing to the world and to myself. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun. I was a little bit nervous. I was thinking, okay, where's this going to go? But I always am with these conversations. But thank you so much for putting this forum together. It's been an absolute delight to talk to you today.
So now I invite you to grab a copy of Coaching for Multilingual Student Success by Karen Johannsen Brock on solutiontree.com or solutiontree.ca to improve everything in your life. Thank you so much, Karen Johannsen Brock. That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.the-ykm.com. Meant to make you grow.